We're recording.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome everybody to. I'm back. Yay! I'm back and upright. Another episode of Wood, Air, and Metal, where I am not totally taken out by the camera. I don't mind if we talk about it. It's not like it was. I mean, it sucked, but it wasn't traumatic. I didn't get anywhere near as everybody else does.
Yeah.
So
Adam had a brain transplant.
no, they pulled my head out of my butt. Is what it was.
I don't know what you said, but I don't think I want to.
No, still recouping a little bit. I still got some junk in my head, but otherwise I'm feeling a ton better.
Very good.
So, anyways,
Well, that's good. You probably haven't played much at all, have you?
no, that's when you know that I'm really sick, because I don't practice. I thought about maybe I can get one of my kids to bring my electric guitar down, and I can just lay on the couch, and I'm like, nope, screw it, I'm just sleeping. I'm just gonna lay here and get it done. I finally started practicing again yesterday. Is when I actually felt like I could do it without having to push myself to do it.
Yeah.
Just kind of take it easy as much as possible, get as well as I could before I started back into a work routine. So that is paid off. And it kind of actually, I'm surprised at how much I didn't lose. Because I've been working up a thing for a guy for that game, and I'm still just a little bit under tempo. I'm like 9 beats under the target, or 9 BPM under the target, which isn't a whole lot, but it. That's
when it's 36 beats per minute, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's septuplets. What was it? It's 69 beats per minute to the bar.
Septuplet or septuplet triplets, right?
It's crazy quick. It's not that fast, but I just my picking technique isn't what it used to be, so I got to work it up. But I didn't actually lose that much ground, which is a good sign to me.
Yeah.
I was like, not touching the instrument for a week. I was right where I left off. Cool.
Yeah, I think sure, you lose a little technique when you're off for a little bit, but it comes back pretty quick, I think, in general.
Well, it's like one of the big things that David Russell said. He's like, we practice, classical, and basically every serious musician, not just a classical thing, but we practice so hard all the time. It's nonstop pushing our envelope that we need to learn to take a break, which I hate doing personally, but it still sometimes it works well. Like this, I think I was telling my other students about it. It's sometimes taking a break allows you to shed your bad things that you don't know that's even there. And the thing that you've had this goal of the entire time are overshadowed by the problems that you're having that you don't know about. And when you finally stop, the good habits that you've been drilling forever have a chance to shed everything else, and you come back with all that learned technique. At least I find that. If I take more than a week off, though, it starts to get pretty shaky pretty quick. Especially,
I think, I was talking before, I think I said, was it like March through April this past year is the first time I ever really took a break, but it was like a good 5 weeks of not playing at all, which is pretty much prior to that, at most there would be like a day here and there, and you could probably count in like 2 or 4 hands how many days in 30 years or 20 some years, 30 years or whatever that I missed playing. There's not very many of them, except for that 5-week stretch. But when I thought it was kind of good in a way, like it was a refresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that in other things too. I was thinking in sports, when I played football a little bit, like I played football through middle school and high school and stuff. But when you stepped away, the game actually slowed down, I thought. So every time I come back, the game seems slower than it was before. And you could see stuff that you couldn't see before. It was kind of interesting. It's like your brain needed time to if you were in it all the time, you would never see it. But if you step back for a little bit, all of a sudden your brain starts doing stuff in the background. You don't know about it. And then you notice things, and it changes your perception a little bit.
Well, speaking of breaks, that's a good segue into the Instagram thing, because Mateus, how do you spell his last name?
Why am I'm blanking on his name. Asanto, or is that what it is? Something like that.
Ato or something? ASAET UO or something. I'm butchering all the spelling. I'm going to use this handy dandy internet thing we have in front of us and find out.
Yeah, so one of the bigger, if you didn't see, one of the bigger internet guitar stars in a way. Even though I think he had like a whole thing before the internet, and it just sort of transpired into the internet thing.
ASAPO.
Yeah, Sato maybe. He sort of announced like a retirement, I think.
Thing. I mean, who knows? It was very cryptic. He's just like, I just haven't been playing. It's not any fun anymore, and just stop. I mean, he's just taking a break. But
yeah, we were talking about that a little bit ago. The that culture now, like the internet culture, where you have to do something for what did you do? Like, what did you do for me lately? I think, like, you ever see that Eddie Murphy skit on his what was that, from Raw or one of those? And he marries the woman from Africa, and she's like, Eddie, what did you do for me lately? Um, anyway, Instagram and Facebook is very much like that. Like, no matter what you put out there, if like past 24 hours, it's just gone. Like, it's out of it. It might as well just be deleted. Like, no one's gonna find it, not for the most part. It just kind of disappears and fades into oblivion.
I wonder how much of that is actually the Facebook algorithm.
I think it is a lot of that, right?
I mean, clearly, because, in one sense, it's to the Facebook's company best interest to always put content that's continually new, because that keeps people interested.
That's probably the theory, right?
That's my theory, at least.
Well, I mean, like, that's probably their theory too. Like, the way they run their company, they think people want to see new, and maybe we all love new stuff, right? That somehow that we have this attachment to new, especially I think in the United States in particular. Like, when you listen to music, it's like, what's the new music? What's the new music? A lot of times in the popular culture. But yeah, like, is that reality? There's probably so much good stuff in the vault that, like, if Facebook or somebody was smart about it, they would find stuff that people liked even more than what stuff that's new. I mean, like, if they could somehow filter through and find the diamonds in the rough that got lost, that no one paid attention to.
The whole thing where they, after Eddie Van Halen died, they did all those videos of, like, this is Eddie's recording vault, and all these tapes of sessions, like walls and walls of tapes of sessions that he did with, and stuff that just, like, he never put out. And he was always meaning to go back through and get it, and it's like all this stuff that, and any mild Van Halen fan would be like, let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, every time that happens, right? Like the Zappa family trust, when Prince died, Prince apparently has like 70 hours of like stuff, or whatever, more maybe that. And like, he never thought it was good enough to release or whatever. And he died young enough that he never really like have anyone in mind to take over his estate. And who knows what's going to happen with that. But you see, like, any little thing you could imagine gets put out,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the opposite thing. It's like, depending on the bigness of the person, sometimes they just pull stuff and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is a long lost recording of this, and it's it's basically like 3 notes different from the original version, but it's marketed for something to make money. And I don't begrudge people making money, but sometimes you can scrape it. In the classical world, that happens whenever there's like a lost work that's been discovered. Like, I remember I want to say the Rantucci Guitar Festival. It was in Buffalo, New York. It was a guitar festival. I didn't compete in it, but I was just like participating and did a masterclass and so on. But they were premiering a piece by Dennis Aguado, who's a famous classical guitar composer. Like, wrote some absolutely monster pieces for guitar, and everybody loves his music. But they found a long lost piano forte and guitar duo. So like, oh, all right, we're gonna premiere this thing here, and like, people were walking out of the concert because it was so bad.
Really?
Music was like, that's something that should have totally just stayed buried. Clearly that was. Like, and I think they found it in like some old piano, like under something or whatever. God only knows where it really was, but it wasn't exactly a good find.
That reminds me of like totally different topic in a way, but like the different kinds of genius. I don't know if you ever seen that. Like there's kind of like the childhood genius, and we're very good at spotting those people, and we love them, right? Everybody loves the like 7-year-old doctor that can play violin and guitar backwards, whatever, and wrote 17 symphonies. But we're not very good at finding there's like that kind of genius, but then there's like the 50-year-old genius, the one that is like iterative and always like making all these changes. So like it's like Mozart, you find his scores and they're almost impeccable, right? They're like first draft and they look pretty good. But they don't ever tweak it. Like it never gets, in a way, it's kind of a stagnant kind of genius because it's like they kind of just stick with whatever that was and they don't mess with it. But then you have the other kind. I think like Bartok kind of comes to mind too. Like they're like the tweakers that they've constantly tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, and you can find 17 million versions until you get to the one that they thought was good enough. Mm-hmm. And we're not very good at spotting those people generally, and we don't treat them particularly well.
Yeah, well, it's like Ives. Charles Ives was like, I forget what he did as a quote unquote real job before he was a composer, but he like gave himself a heart attack because he would write so much. He was so overworked just because of what he wanted to do, and he ended up transforming music to an extreme.
He got real quiet all of a sudden.
Did? How about now?
Not sure why. Yeah, I can barely hear you actually.
Really? All right, let me turn it up. And that's odd.
This is professional work right here.
Is this better?
Maybe.
I didn't really change anything.
No, it just like changed all of a sudden.
Huh. Yeah, my gain is crazy high. What's on? Let's see here. Check. Yeah, I mean, I can push it a little bit more, but I am almost up there. Is it any better?
Maybe. I can hear you. I turned you up on my headphones too. That was weird.
Yeah, because
What I'm not sure is if it'll get quiet on the thing.
Yeah, that would really suck. Yeah. I'm recording it as well, so I haven't lost any volume on my end.
Okay.
Odd. All I did was move a little bit, but that shouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like it's probably a Zoom glitch or something. Anyway, yeah, I can hear you. I mean, I can hear you. I think it's okay.
So, like with him, he was clearly a genius, but just took it a different route, and it took him forever to get recognized. Like trying to break into that, at least digging back. So I think that you're absolutely right in that regard, because there's a lot of quote unquote late bloomers into what we would define as genius, Right. Didn't the guy that started KFC do it when he was like 65, 70?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And came up with it, formed a huge empire. That's business, and it's a little bit different with chicken compared to music. But at the same time, why not? I think that's the other thing. Maybe there's a good portion of the idea that genius has to be something that's produced young rather than over a long period of time, and all of a sudden it becomes what it is because of experience on top of that. It's right. Like, okay, he's 67 years old, but he's been writing his entire life, and then it adds up like a cumulative interest, and all of a sudden he's got these brilliant works of music that he's just putting out. And I'm just speaking in generalities. I don't know anybody that comes to mind with that, but I still think that principle kind of applies, that there's kind of a weird social fascination. Maybe it's because it's easier to measure when it's a kid, because there's such a commonality of steps in development that we all see. So when we see something that's acting at that's adult wise, and we go, holy cow, that's pretty impressive, because they're 7, but they're doing something that somebody that's 25 can't do. So it's an easy quantifiable spectrum versus the guy that's 65 and has this crazy thing that's ability that's the same thing as Jacob Collier or whatever. We just, because he's older, we're like, oh, okay, whatever, he's just 65.
Boring. Yeah, a little too
boring.
old. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, there's definitely plenty of those people though that have been successful. I think I'm probably messing up who it was. I think it was Cezanne though, the painter
yeah,
that
yeah.
was like the late bloomer type. And what something you were saying was that's why I thought of this in general was you can find like 30 versions of a painting before you got to the one that is famous, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now those previous um, paintings, the like scrapped ones that he never wanted to show anyone, are worth just as much as like the famous one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of like the Hendrix family or whatever, like putting out the old stuff that he wouldn't like never put out himself, but um, because it's there, they do it. My wife and I, we've talked about that too. Like, um, what if you were an artist? Like, if your music took off and it was making lots of money, but there was just tons of stuff you never ever wanted anyone to hear, but then you died. Would you want them to put that out if you knew that it was going to take care of them? You know?
Well, I mean, fiscally, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer when it comes to family. Artistically, it'd be like that's like somebody going through my journals after I'm dead. Like, no, just burn them, get rid of it. I don't want anybody to know like what I'm really thinking about them or something like that. Though, I mean, clearly music is a different thing. You're not going like this guy was such a jackass to me today or whatever when you're writing it down. It's more of a the what's the way to put it? It's more of the creative process. We don't want anybody to see the flubs. We want them to just have like this is what I'm satisfied with. So this is the aspect of this song that I want to share with you. Not be like times where I was out of tune or I couldn't get the particular passage right or whatever that I drilled and drilled and drilled and then it's out there. It's like releasing the practice before a concert or something. By practice before a concert, I don't mean like day of that you've been working towards. I mean like day one when you're getting the music fresh and there's no markings on the page and you're sitting there and being like, okay, I'm going to play this note this way or maybe I want it this way. Or what does it make it harder to go with the side? Or how do I want to do it?
Yeah.
Those types of things. And I think that's a little bit different. But ultimately, if it came down to like that being a fiscal thing for my family, take it. I don't care. I'm dead. What am I going to do? Come back and haunt? Give you guys motivation to come back and haunt? I don't know. So, but I really wouldn't care. So I'd be more, I guess you could say, if it was unfinished works, then I'd be a little bit more insecure about it. You know what I mean? Like if it was like an undone thing, even if it was a lousy done thing, I'd be more satisfied with that than something that was phenomenal but unfinished.
Interesting. Well, I mean, now that's kind of what you hear. That's all you see from like the Hendrix family, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
I'm getting all kinds of the audio is a little weird. I don't know why.
Yeah, you're starting to get quiet all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's being weird over here.
That's not the new interface, is it?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I can do it like this, but it's kind of noisy too. So the problem is you're really quiet to me, but then I'm really loud to me, and I can't.
Now you're better.
Yeah, I put the noise gate on so I could hear you better. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, whichever. So, technical problem. So yeah, and I guess this all relates to the Instagram thing and with Mateus Asado and even what you said that Eric Johnson said. How I wonder how much does this all feed together in the sense of Eric Johnson. I have your quote here. Has the function of music changed? He was basically reminiscing of he's like before way back when that people would listen to music to kind of get lost in it. It was a time of almost like watching a good TV show instead of just audible. Now it's like it's background. It's this, we throw it on when we're working out. It's become more of a noise thing than an experience, quote unquote. At least my words on it. And I kind of get what he's coming from, but then my argumentative brain is like, well, is that just looking through the glass half or looking what's the good old days bias of things used to be so much better if we did it this way, or when
Yeah.
we were doing it
You
this
know, it
way.
was interesting though. So this was an interview he was doing with Rick Beato, and I saw it.
Oh, nice.
And he wasn't like being down about it in a way. He was just kind of like, he's kind of like, maybe it sort of changed. Like he's like, maybe the function of music has changed, and it's not really about the sitting around and just listening and enjoying it. And he's talking about not like musicians, right? We all listen to it, and I
Mhm.
know I actually put this on my Facebook page, and half the people were like, "Well, like I listen to music like that," but it's like, well, I know the musicians do because we're nerdy about it, and that's what we love to do. But kind of like putting that out there, let's say for non-musicians, how often are you only just listening to music as the only activity that you do, and not like listening to music while you're working out or listening to music while you're cutting the grass or doing the dishes or listening to music while you're playing a video game or something? Like, when are you just solely spending the time listening to music? Or even more, like somebody was pointing out, and we used to do this too, and maybe you did this as a kid, you like have just like almost like listening parties with your friends, like you're just hanging out, and like that's what you did. You weren't playing a game,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
weren't talking about anything, you're just listening.
Yeah,
And
I remember doing that with the Stone Temple Pilots, the new U2 albums, stuff like that. Like I would do that with just nothing. But that also goes with like, I can't remember. I don't see a whole lot of houses with high-end stereos in them anymore.
yeah, that's another good point.
It's like you have
Everyone's
great,
listening through their like Amazon Echo or whatever, or the
and I
sound
wonder.
bar or something.
Well, I mean, clearly we know from experience. As soon as I got the good Nobles right here, um, as soon as I got some good headphones, I was like really good. Not AirPods, not Beats, not whatever, but just kind of went to an extreme and dropped. What was it, like $350? Well, I paid $350. They're considerably cheaper now, but it was like, all right, let's see what all the hubbub's about. And I put them in and was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's like getting a new pair of glasses. It's like I didn't know I was missing all that detail, and that right there just hooked me right into actually listening. It's
Yeah, I got my wife those grottos, and she listens to music all the time now. Like, so she just like go in a room, put like the headphones on, they're great headphones, and she just loves it. Like, it just makes her smile like the whole time. And
yeah,
she
it's such,
obviously loves being around music, or she would have left me forever ago. but but I mean, I don't know if that's partly because of the influence of marrying a musician, and that she's into it that way. Or I don't know if she did that before I don't think she ever really did.
yeah.
Um, so we listen to a lot of music in our house. There's always music on,
Mm-hmm.
almost 24/7. There's music on in the house, and everything you can think of. It's just the way it is here. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, do you think it's just a bias? Or maybe was it always like that? Like, is it easy to say, "Oh man, when I was a kid, we used to have listening parties or whatever,"
Um,
but now they don't. But it's like, well, you're not a kid anymore. How do you know that's not what kids are doing? You
yeah.
don't know that.
I mean, I think that's clearly some of it is like that bias is there. Duh, that just happens with age. You remember things through a particular lens just because of whatever. But if I do that, if that makes a difference. The underlying thing I think is just the attention span might be part of it. Speaking of the Facebook, Instagram thing, when you're scrolling, you're not really reading every particular post. You're going for something that's got the gotcha, and then you kind of look at it.
Hmm.
Um, and that maybe that's factoring into just lowering attention span in general when it's so quick and it's such a rewarding thing of taking the gamble and flipping through. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Click. All right, whatever. And then you just kind of like go through the rest of it to something else. It's almost like pulling a thing on a slot machine. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't win. Oh, hey, I won. So if I keep playing, I'll keep winning. Something interesting will eventually come along. And then the algorithms go into feeding that. It finds the stuff that you're interested in. And so you keep continually getting these things. And then those things maybe get a little bit boring. Um, So it could be all just self-feeding into it. The algorithm's designed to get your attention in the quickest way possible. It finds the things that are quick and get your attention, which has you lower your attention span because it's quick. And then so you keep feeding it, and the algorithm keeps giving it to you. And the next thing you know, you have this positive feedback loop of a nice walking advertisement, which and we all love it. So it's not like it's complete. I don't think it's completely negative. I have a thing. Pet peeves with social media in general, regardless, but that's completely not related to that particular thing. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it has to do with a little bit more of depth and conversation and so on. It's so public and soundbite worthy that you can't have in-depth conversations, which is funny because we're promoting this on social media and everything else, and we have this hour-long form discussion about guitar and all that. So it's this weird flux of all this stuff together. Joe Rogan having 3-hour podcasts while getting stoned is not something that you normally would pay attention to, but that's the most popular thing that's out there, which is nuts. You think about it, it's like, really? Like that's the most popular podcast is this guy talking. But I think it's also people just enjoy the honest banter, and it's something you can throw on and not have to pay attention to, to an extent. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of getting into that, why are we more attracted to, well, there's that aspect, like the sort of like, here's the real me thing, but it's fake though, right? Like it's a big problem, and it's a huge problem, or a problem, I say it's a problem, with like Instagram and stuff, and in particular with the guitar players, where there's all this stuff, and this is part of what Mateus was saying why he quit, that it's played off like it's sort of like a one-off, like, hey, I'll just put the camera on and look at this cool little riff thing I'm working on. But what in reality it was 75 takes, the lighting's perfect, the sound may or may not be the sound from that particular take, but the video was better, so you use the sound from the other one, and which is all fine. You should put out the best product you can or whatever. It's the like sort of disingenuous side of social media though, where no one's it makes everyone else feel like, well, why can't I get that sound? Like, why doesn't it sound like this? Or why, man, when I try that the first time, it doesn't really work that well. But he gets it on his first, he does it like off the cuff, but like that person actually didn't do it off the cuff. So that they're presenting a fake person or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not the real whoever they are. And I think Mateus kind of mentioned that too. Like, you spend hours and hours making these little 60-second videos for Instagram.
I mean, maybe not hours and hours. I know that when I do something, the only things that are really raw for me on Instagram are when I'm practicing, quote unquote. Like when I'm doing drills, that's just like, I got to a point where I was like, well, I'm doing this drill and it should be perfect. So I did the things with like multiple takes and all that stuff. And then I was just like, yeah, screw it. It's practice. That's it. Practice is for discovering the perk and working it out. So that's generally, if it's the metronome going, that's not like I've done it 16, 17 times. It's like I hit record and I go through it, with all the beats and bloops and wonderful mess that's part of it. Just to be able to get the experience of playing it and recording things. Though I do think there's a great benefit to doing the recording things with the idea of putting it out, because it puts you into a pressure situation.
Yeah.
And that mindset is something that gets you better. Like it pushes more focus because you're actually paying attention to everything that's going on.
Yeah, but do you think, like, I mean, is what people put on or on Instagram in particular, is it music? Like, when you put a 60-second cool lick idea, whatever, on there, particularly like overly polished, but that's one thing or another. and you're doing that daily, but maybe you've like none of it ever turns into a song. You know, it
Hmm.
never turns into an album or anything. It doesn't ever evolve into anything. It's just that little sort of trick. Um, is that what our music is now? Is that maybe back to Eric's thing? Like no one even like that's all we can take is 30 seconds of a sort of a riff, but you know, it doesn't really have to have any. There's no development. There's no theme and motives. None of that stuff gets. None of that ever happens in any of those videos.
No, no, definitely not in 60 seconds. Uh,
I mean, I can appreciate the sort of like, hey, I'm gonna tackle the 60-second challenge, and I'm gonna like Bruce Foreman, who's a jazz guitar player. They put out an album of like little 60-second things, but each one with like a musical statement that was a little different. And it's kind of a clever little project.
hmm.
But
I was going to point out that Max Richter, the minimalist composer, some of his tracks are like a minute, minute and a half, and they're
yeah,
great. You know, like it's like
but is that all he does? You know?
clearly not. I mean, I was just I was just going to counter that, but that is like wading in with his other tracks that are 6, 7 minutes, and even more. He's got that 24-hour album as well, so he's
Right.
truly got the balance on both ends of the spectrum with that. Um, and I think, I mean, I think there's great things about it. I mean, it's so cliched, but it's true in the ultimate sense because it's like there's great things about it because we see stuff that's inspiring and interesting in that little blip, and there's really, really bad outcomes with it of a shortened attention span and this mystique of, oh, this guy nailed it in one take. It's like, no, I guarantee that if you go through his phone, you're going to see 14 takes with a lot more swearing involved.
Well,
Uh,
and then there's like 17 camera angles and like
yeah, and all that other stuff, and then like it, the there's clearly there's the fake videos that caused that controversy like X amount of months ago or years. I don't even remember, where Instagram guitarists were speeding up the videos and so on. And it's like, why the hell would you do that? I mean, some of these guys when they were speeding it up, it's like you can clearly play, like, well, it's just not fast, and
right.
so it's like if you want the Instagram fame, I guess you kind of push it that hard in terms of the speed. But again, that goes to what's quantifiable as good music.
It reminds me a little bit of one of the other issues that we have is well, maybe this is what led to the Instagram phenomenon in that there at least a few years ago, some of the like more bigger YouTube players that's a little bit longer format, but
Mhm.
like have zero albums out, have don't have a band, never play live, but like have signature guitars and endorsements
Mhm.
and some of them in the pseudo like jazz ish world. Um, it's kind of like a weird thing, and I don't begrudge them for having that success or whatever, but it's like they don't even have an album. Never actually made any music in a way. Like it's just
Oh,
like these
yeah.
2-minute clips of some pretty amazing playing, but it's not. There's no like. It's all flash and no substance or something.
Well, there's something to. I think there's a little bit of substance. Like there's clearly the flashy stuff is what gets your attention. Like watching somebody just sit there and isn't going to really hold your attention too much unless you're like a technique fiend and David Russell's doing it and you want to see exactly how his fingernail is coming off the string or whichever. But that's not that appealing. But to this, something a little bit faster or whatever is immediately it catches somebody's eye. Maybe it's like the idea of speed is so ingrained into the human evolutionary psychology of a measurable event that no matter what that actually takes it comes up in, no matter what form, is something that we pay attention to because it's easily be like, oh, that was fast. Like you can definitely tell when something is fast, or you know what I mean.
Sure.
um who knows, and I'm just kind of rambling a little bit about that. I got to stop reading so many books on evolutionary psych lately. um but the maybe that's part of it, and then that just becomes hyper commercialized. The algorithms feeding into it, and then we get these things, and we don't necessarily have art anymore, because maybe there has to be some type of a depth to art that requires more participation on the listener than 60 seconds. It's like in one sense, it's like going to an art museum and getting bored. It's like, well, there's a reason why these classic works are classic works, and they're sitting behind armed guards because everybody wants to steal it and it's worth whatever amount of money. It's not to be instant like that. Like, it takes time to engage with the work and get what they're doing. Sometimes it takes reading the plaque just to kind of open the door. Yeah. I remember I was talking with my brother-in-law is the head of a sculpture department, and we were talking. I was watching the GFA, and another brother-in-law. We were all over at our house, and the GFA was on during my birthday. So I'm like, I turn it on, and the set piece was very, very
GFA.
odd.
For anyone who doesn't know, it's a classical guitar competition.
Yeah, it happens every year. But every year they have a new set piece by a new composer. And that doesn't get released till a month before the event. So everybody that competes has 1 month to learn a virtuosic piece of music and compete with it right then and there. So that's the draw. It's like, ooh, we get to see, you're good, but are you that good? Because that's a whole different level. You can read the piece or have the music, but I doubt your sight reading it in that environment. So anyways, the piece was like, I thought it was pretty cool, but it had a lot of microtonal bends. Yeah. So instead of doing just a straight chromatic thing, and everybody was playing it the same way. And one of my brothers-in-law's remarked, like, that just sounds terrible. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, but that is unbelievably hard to do consistently, like every single time that thematic thing comes around, to keep that line going in those microtonal steps, especially on a nylon string. I
mean, that's just not familiar with that music, so then it becomes.
But that's
horrible.
What I'm getting with, and it's so my brother-in-law that was a sculptor guy, he's like, I've tried explaining high art to people that aren't involved in any artistic thing, and it's just hard. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It is that step into specialized, where you have to know it so well to realize what they're doing, that makes it that difficult. And there is a lot of that going on in artistic circles, especially in academia. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I think that in order for people to get more enjoyment of it, you have to learn to engage a little bit more besides the quick little glance at the Mona Lisa. You got to stare at that thing and get sure. Or however it is, even poetry, right. All these things in art forms became what they were because they're speaking to some level of intuitive function of the human brain that everybody can pick up on. I mean, it's like everybody has music to an extent. Everybody does visual arts. Every culture throughout history has those representations there. So there's clearly something deeply part of us that relates to that.
Yeah, we'll have to get in two things. We'll have to get into that someday. Just what is art, kind of, which is an interesting topic. Yep. Because it's not, at least in my opinion, it's not just like taking a picture. A beautiful picture doesn't necessarily mean it's art, right? Mm-hmm. Art has to have some. There's another aspect of it, probably. But you reminded me of something earlier, which is I had a boss. I work in engineering during the day, and he was talking about his sister who was a PhD music, composer, whatever, and taught in college, and like she's dedicated her life to making music and writing music. And he was talking about how his family, they all went to see some thing that she put on, I don't know if it was a recital or if it was just a concert or whatever. And he was like, yeah, we all were like, she clearly went off the deep end, And I said to him, I'm like, so she's dedicated her entire life to music, like, and it, and you love her, she's your sister, you're proud of her, she's smart, that she has good ideas or whatever, but you won't listen to, or you can't get past like whatever perceived thing you have about music to just trust your sister to take you someplace. Like, you can't just let go and say, you know what, she's the expert in music, maybe I should listen and just, if she tells me that it's good, I'm not saying you have to totally accept it, but like maybe you should at least be open to it. Like
Yeah.
if you met like Chef Ramsay or whatever, right? And he made you something and he's like, this is the best thing. Trust, this is the best thing I've ever made in my life. Like this is so good. And you're like, this is disgusting, Um, who is right there? Like, I mean, you like to think that you would say, you know what, I'll give it a try. I'm gonna give it. I mean, this guy he's one of the greatest chefs in the world. Most people think so. Whatever. Like I trust that they would give me something good. But for some reason with music, and I think most people would actually, most people would say, all right, let's try it. That sounds good. Um, where in music, we're just like, no, that's that's terrible. Yeah, that's horrible music. It sounds awful. Or we obviously it happens in visual art too.
Well, there's also the trickle down from the academic ivory tower. Like, as much as she was like in there and at the forefront of like pushing the musical boundaries, that's probably 30 years before it's going to become common to where everybody else is. It's like those ideas happen and then it takes forever for that to kind of like eventually become like, oh yeah, that's this.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
I think that happens a lot. And it's not that we can't appreciate those particular things, but there's some things that we just don't get. To harp on the Jacob Collier thing, it's like clearly I know the kid is unbelievable at what he does, but I just don't put on his music.
Yeah, but
like,
you also don't say,
oh, that's bad.
He's horrible.
Yeah, not in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you just say, well, it's not really my thing. There's some things about it that I like, and there's some things that I don't like, but you don't just outright be like, nah, he's making garbage, like.
Yeah,
he has no talent whatsoever. He's useless.
Yeah, old enough with my music playing and experience to where it's like, nah, if you're publishing stuff and it's being published, you're not a slouch. I may not like it, but that doesn't mean you're a moron. Like back when if I was 20, it would be the complete, of course I'm a moron. This is garbage. Blah, blah, blah. Look at my no album self. It's and there's something to be said for that too. It's like, well, if you think that it's that bad and you can do better, there's really not, especially today. Like when I was 20, it was like, okay, you got to pay for studio time, you got to blah blah blah. There's a lot more. Nowadays it's like spend $150, get an interface and a condenser mic, and let's see what you got.
Yeah.
It's very easy to put the money where your mouth is with anything. So I think that it's the topic of art and guitar and music it's huge. It's absolutely giant. I mean, it's clearly huge because I haven't really budged too much off of that outside of bashing on the Facebook and the Instagram things. And maybe there is a deadening to an extent of quality and commercialization. Who knows? It's the strangest thing. You get Warhol where he produced tons of mass-produced some artwork, but it's still fantastic. So
yeah.
The production quality of it stayed up there. Is it an original? No, but it's really freaking close. Like really, really close. So there's something to be said that value is also something in terms of the quality of the product that's produced, even if it's produced 70 times or 700,000 times. If it's really good quality, great. There's going to be duds and everything else in there. It's a hugely immense topic, but that goes to what are the things that move people, what are the stories that move people. A lot of there's religious iconography, there's tribal music, there's it's cave drawings. It's everywhere. Everybody has something to say with that in order to tell somebody else something. And the funny thing is like stuff that we've had, I don't know, maybe we have something going back like 40,000 years of the cave drawing. You can tell that it's hunting. Like, I'm definitely not a hunter, not in any way, shape, or well, I haven't hunted or foraged for food ever. But looking at that cave drawing picture, like a picture of it, obviously not in person, it's like, oh, that's what this guy's doing, which is crazy in terms of you figure the communicative staying power of something that old that it speaks to every single human being that looks at it is like, oh, that's what they're doing. That's pretty freaking cool. I wonder what would happen if we had recordings from like the first instruments and so on, what it would be in terms of like, what would it sound like? That, what was that? Was it an X-Files episode where they had the Lazarus Bowl or whichever, where like they were allegedly tracking this item that when Jesus called, raised Lazarus from the dead and like used the words that he said, somebody was spinning a bowl and it recorded it.
Actually, I think I do. That sounds sort of familiar. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was X-Files or maybe Warehouse 13, one of the two, some show like that.
Yeah.
And it was just, that would be fascinating, just to hear the old, like maybe there's some rock that's vibrating like a Liar's song from 30,000 years ago or whatever. Who knows? It would be interesting to really hear the foundational aspects of music as compared to what we've developed once we were able to keep better records. And we really have gotten better records. There's no doubt about that. But, like now that we are able to, especially able to access it in a second, it's how much has really changed with that. Is the song, if we heard a sad song that some composer 40,000 years ago or whatever played, or some shepherd or whatever, would we still think it's sad now? That would be a real interesting take on that. Like things that we'll probably never know any way, shape, or form.
Well, unless the childhood's end thing happens. Did you ever read that book?
Why do I know the name? Who is it? Is that Clark? No,
I don't remember. Yeah, it's a Clark book, I think. Now I'm blanking, but
I'm gonna do the internet.
It sort of starts like Independence Day, where the spaceships come to Earth. But I don't want to give it away too much, but I'm going to, which is
spoiler warning.
But yeah, here's spoiler warning. So if you're gonna read A Childhood's End, you might want to turn off for a second. But basically though, like at some point they share the like history of Earth because these aliens have been recording it forever. So you could go like watch Jesus and Muhammad and all this stuff. And then like religion just disappears basically. Like because people could see it in the book. Which, as you can imagine, other events happen because of that too, right? But anyway, it's kind of, so they like recorded everything. So if you wanted to go see dinosaurs, you could go, and anywhere. Like imagine just like the ultimate like recording devices. You could go watch anyone, go see anything you ever wanted to. It's all recorded. So to your point, like A Childhood's End, you could be like, hey, I wonder where is the first sign of humans singing music or something.
Yeah. That would be wild. Would it even be human? It's probably some bird song or something.
Oh yeah.
Or reptile song at the time.
I wonder. Yeah, you think almost that once humans started using their voice, or or human-like things to like mimic other animals, like to hunt or whatever, and then that becomes like a song, like, hey, we caught this weird animal and they made this sound, so let's all sing that sound so more of them come around and whatever.
Yeah, hey, I mean, it's if it works to feed you tend to repeat the process again. However you can, it's like, oh, look at this, I have money in my bank account, I'm gonna do more of this. So hopefully.
Is that why you play classical guitar?
Yeah, exactly. Like the forthcoming meme. Is that why you play jazz?
Yeah.
So but even with that, it's a both end. I'm lucky enough to pull in money with it, but I still don't think that. I mean, clearly that's not the thing that drives me to do it, and I'd still be doing it no matter what. I mean, if I'm sitting there in a fever dream thinking of how can I get my guitar here so I can work, that's not just a thing where it's just a job. So
yeah,
it's definitely more than that. And I think that's the thing that makes musicians versus everything else. It's like, yeah, we do this all the time. Like that's just it. It's wired. It's like, okay, like we got to bring in that article that you sent me by what's her face, the one that I want to slap, and that thing. Oh God, that is that is just awful. So she's an advice columnist. Is that it?
Yeah, what's her name? Ann something?
Ann Landers. Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah,
at
you
her.
don't remember seeing those as a kid?
I do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, like ask Anne a
yeah.
question, and somebody sends a letter in, and she answers.
Yeah. So, anyways, the title of the article says "Guitar is no substitute for a balanced lifestyle," and so it goes like, "Dear Anne, my husband and I are having an ongoing battle with our 15-year-old son. He has fallen in love with his guitar and nothing else in his life matters. Homework and friends have been forgotten." Well, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
We agreed to give him lessons, and his teacher said he is quite talented. However, we worry about his failing grades and lack of a social life. Again, we have had so many frustrating conversations with him, explaining the importance of being a well-balanced person and how this will affect him getting into college. We've also tried limiting the guitar time, but nothing has changed except he is making the family more miserable than ever. Is there anything that we can do? And I was like, good Lord, that sounds exactly like me at that age.
Maybe I missed the part where it says his teacher says he's very talented or whatever.
Yeah, that would be like, then you should probably listen to his teacher. Anyways, but her reply is the thing that just was like, wow, you're boring. Yeah, not mean, just like she's clearly if she's writing an advice columnist, she's clearly got nothing better to do with her time besides mess with other people. Anyways, so she replied, "Dear parents, have a long talk with Elvis, quote unquote, and explain your position. Tell him you're
Yeah, like what a jerk comment that was.
Yeah, that
like
was just like
she wants to call the son Elvis because the only like
they did
guitar player she could think of.
Yeah, probably. But the writers signed off as parents of the next Elvis, quote unquote. So maybe it was a little bit of a derogatory shot at the kid.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes they did label it. So in all honesty, that's what it says. And I'm looking right at it, obviously. But she says, explain your position, tell him you appreciate his musical talent and will be supportive, provided he keeps his grades up and occasionally participates in non-guitar activities. Agree to 2 hours a day of guitar time. I can't help but laugh at that. Agree to 2 hours a day of guitar time during the week and unlimited weekends if he keeps up his end of the bargain. Lock up the equipment if you have to. Yeah, that would never happen. And the boy needs some balance in his life. And if it's any consolation, when he discovers girls and cars, the guitar will be less important to him.
Yeah, what a crappy way. Like, it's one thing to say, make your kid do their homework or whatever. But then to say, don't worry about it anyway. Like, as soon as girls come around and like, it's like the most like chauvinistic, like, and also like, just like, it's just horrible. Oh, what cars and girls, then I'll never think about guitar again. Don't worry, because that's better. Like, that's the.
It's such a God. I mean, it wrangled me in just so many different ways. This thing is just such a freaking cliched outlook. And I mean, it's like maybe it just really pisses me off as a teacher because it's like, kid has that much drive and talent. Look out. Like,
why are we another whole topic we'll have to get into one day, but like, why do we always push towards mediocrity or like everyone has to be the same? Like that's an unfortunate part of our school system. Now maybe it's everywhere, but like we're trying to make everyone the same and everyone equal and everyone like we never like say you have a class and a kid's just like really getting into some like scientific concept or something. We say, oh, wait, it's 11:35. You have to stop working on that. It's time for English class. It's like, well, that kid's like driven right now. Like, why not just let them figure that thing out? Like, you have an opportunity right now, like to spur creativity and innovation and like just thought process and problem solving and all these things. But instead we say, nope. And by the way, you're not going to get a chance to think about that problem that you were getting into for the next 6 hours. No way. You don't get to think about it. Like why we teach like that and why we treat education like that is really unfortunate.
It is. It's quite unfortunate. It's not letting anybody play to their strengths.
Yeah.
Which is I absolutely can't stand personally. Especially as a teacher. I mean, that's like one of the last things that I would potentially do. But then again, my teaching environment is more one-on-one than it is in the classroom. So that classroom settings make it more difficult. But then you can add in, like, does the compulsory element of the classroom, K through 12, factor into the push through to just get to the next thing done, because we have to get all these particular things done. And by the time they're out, they're 18 and they're expected to do whichever else.
You haven't got good at anything because we didn't let you.
Yeah, anything.
But now you got it. Now you got to go fend for yourself out in the world. Good luck.
Yeah. How do I cook? Well, you go to McDonald's, son.
Well, you did take a class once for 30 minutes on how to cook, so you should be good.
Yeah, when in 7th grade. It's now been 5 years. So, all that stuff. But yeah, we'll keep that in the back burner. So like we're not going to talk about that again. But maybe like it. Yeah, I don't know, that the Landers thing just really pissed me off. It's like crushing this kid's potential to be like everybody else.
Though it could have been like one of our parents that wrote that.
The thought did go through my head, and I'm just like, 2 hours a day. That's it.
Yeah.
Put a zero on.
It's easy for us to say, well, like we know what it takes, or at least have some idea what it takes to be good at something, and it takes a lot longer than 2 hours a day. So your kid showed initiative to do anything more than 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to like support that?
Mm-hmm. That's I mean, outside of like playing video games, but to an extent, it's that the drive of self-improvement in a task that has intellectual and characteristic depth shouldn't be sniped off to do something that's kind of meaningless to an extent.
Right. You know what's gross too is like if the kid was a pianist or violinist, then I guarantee that Anne would be like, oh, you have to support that. You should go find a better teacher. You should go, like, how did you get a good enough equipment? Like, you might have something there. You might have, but because it was guitar is like this bad thing,
That is a good point. I wonder. I mean, maybe she's coming with the filters of the 50s or whatever, wherever she grew up. So the guitar wasn't considered, and I mean, it's still not to an extent a virtuosic instrument in terms of public perception. Like we all know that the crazy. You get what I'm saying. Like when somebody said they were a concert pianist, you'd immediately have a particular thing. If somebody said I'm a trained jazz guitarist, they wouldn't be the same.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Level of picture with that, like in terms of the perception wouldn't be.
Yeah, their status in society is not as high.
That's what.
Like a real classical great pianist is like with doctors and stuff, right? like oh, you're one of those people, you're
exactly
different level class. But yeah, anything guitar, it's like you're like street scum.
Yeah, geez.
And this is positive.
Yeah, yeah, that was it's called I'm getting tired. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that might be a good spot to kind of end what we were talking about. I think it all ties together for the most part. Like
that's good.
In the Instagram and then Facebook algorithms and what is art to a small extent, and does the algorithms control the response, and then it becomes a self-feedback loop. We covered a lot of good stuff. Not a huge amount of music, but I didn't really do a huge amount of music this past week.
I guess just to plug a few things that recently happened. I did go on Get Some Productions podcast this past week, and was interviewed on there to talk about Chick Corea, who just passed away. So if you get a chance, we'll put the link in here. You can check it out. It was kind of cool talking about that stuff. Just like if you want another podcast to check out, Keith and I can't remember the partner's name who I didn't get to talk to. They're running a pretty cool podcast over there about like production and like how do you make good recordings and stuff. So that's going on. I guess that's the only thing I have to plug, really.
Yeah. I mean,
we did. Oh, last week, if you didn't see, Adam wasn't here. We did put out kind of a lesson thing. So I think we're going to try to do more of those. Maybe we'll try to do another one this week, and Adam and I will just do them as we come around to it. But it's sort of the things we wish we knew when we first started. And we might even do them without really telling each other what we're doing, so that it's possible you get the same lesson or the same sort of like thing from a different angle, which I think will be kind of nice.
Yeah, I think that I can't wait to see that happen organically.
Yeah, right.
That'll be interesting. So, plus you saying that is like, oh yeah, I should do something like that. I already have a couple in my head.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
It's like I know exactly where it would go. Blah 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 blah. That sit down, having a chance to sit down. In fact, I think this is the longest I've been talking in the last week and a half or whatever.
The most you've been upright in a week. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That is absolutely true. So I'll take the win on that. So,
well, cool. Let's call it. Till
All
next
right.
time. Maybe this was episode 5. So,
are you counting the lesson thing as an episode?
Yeah, I'm counting that, I guess. So maybe it's episode 4. However you want to count.
It's all not great. Now we have 2 different counting systems.